Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. Pelicans Daily presented by Fan Arch. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm your host, Dylan Bruton. First off, again, thank y'all for the support. Hope y'all had a great weekend. Hope y'all had a happy Memorial Day. Crazy game for those Pacers and Knicks, but hey, the Pacers they're legit. They're the real deal. You know what I'm saying? Halliburton got them on another run. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna see what happens with OKC and Minnesota, but I don't know. It's looking like it's gonna be the battle between the small market franchises. We're gonna see. We're gonna see. But it's been a lot of great ball. But you know what you're here for. You're here for the Pelicans. You're here for the New Orleans Pelicans. So let's get right to it. So Greg Schwartz of Bleacher Report just put out an article of, you know, players who would be dream trade candidates for different teams. And a name that he named, Mr. Jarrett Allen. And he named him as a dream target for us as far as to someone to try to trade for. Now, for those who don't know about Mr. Jarrett Allen, more than happy to tell y'all. So this past year, he averaged 13 and a half points, 9.7 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, a block on 71% shooting, 72% from the free throw line. And the Cavs this year had the second best record in the entire NBA, the second best the best record in the East, and they had the second best defense in the entire league. We had the 27th. They say defense wins championships, and the Cavs were very successful this past year when they had the lineup of Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley together. You know what I'm saying? That was a very talented big man duo. Each provided different aspects to their game. Now, Jarrett Allen, you know what I'm saying, is around roughly 6'9", 6'10". The afro gives him a little bit of a extra boost. And as someone who used to have an afro, hey, I know all about going for every stretching for every inch. But he's got a 7'6" wingspan. He's only 27 years old. $20 million contract. Pretty reasonable, pretty fair. I mean, he was an all-star in 2022, averaging 16, 11 boards, a block on 68% from the field, 71% from the free throw line. For his career, he's averaged around 13, 9, a block on 64% field goal shooting, 71% from the free throw line for his whole career. And, he was first drafted by the Nets back in 2017 at pick 22 after a really good freshman year at Texas. And for his career at the Nets, he averaged 10, 8, and a block on 61% from the field and 70% from the free throw line. And then when he was acquired by the Cavs, he upped those numbers to nearly 15 a game, 10 boards, 2 assists, a block on 66% from the field, 72% from the free throw line. And the reason why Jarrett Allen is now a talking point about potentially being moved is one of the Cavs insiders, Chris Fedor, said that both he and Darius Garland are no longer untouchable. Now, given that they lost rather disappointingly to those Pacers, those Pacers were a menace, granted, the Cavs did have some injury concerns, but Jarrett Allen he didn't play amazing, but he didn't play too bad. Averaged 13, 8, a steal, a block, 72% from the field, 94% from the free throw line, which is very efficient. But a lot of people expected the Cavs to make that leap. They thought, okay, everything is clicking for y'all. You've got two great big men, which is pretty rare in today's league when you have a team that has like a twin tower of two great big men. I talked last episode about the Pistons, about when they had, the Wallace brothers. Obviously, they're not brothers, but when they had Ben and Rasheed, you think about a team like the Spurs back in 99 when they had a young Tim Duncan and a still all-star David Robinson. You go all the way back to 86 when the Rockets made a finals appearance with Ralph Sampson, who was like the first Victor Wembanyama. You heard it first. No, I can't. I can't take full credit. NBA DraftNet also made that comparison. But Ralph Sampson and Hakeem at the big spot. So having a pair of dominant big men, while not in this modern NBA with the 3-point shooting revolution, it's not as popular. it still is effective. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, the Cavs just could not overcome. They could not overcome, the injuries to Garland. Donovan Mitchell being a bit banged up, and then defensively, some of the rotations. I think Kenny Atkinson is a very good coach. He was a great coach in Brooklyn, and I think he's done a wonderful job in Cleveland. But the expectations were high because they had a great year, finished 164 games. You had Evan Mobley, who was a first-time All-Star, Defensive Player of the Year. Jarrett Allen, who I mentioned has been an All-Star in the past. Very, very dependable big man. Very, great interior presence. Then they got DeAndre Hunter in the trade deadline, who's one of the best 3-and-D wings in the league. And as a three, and you can also play a little bit of a four. Cool guy too. I met him. I met him as well when I was living in Atlanta. Little fun fact about me. And then you add the dynamic guard duo of Donovan Mitchell, who at different times of the year looked like an MVP candidate, and to me is one of the best just pure bucket getters in the league. And then Darius Garland, who's one of the best floor generals, point distributors, and one of very well-rounded point guards. So like they had arguably the best starting five in the league. I'd say it was between them, the Thunder and the Celtics as far as who had the best starting fives. And then, guys off the bench, a guy like Ty Jerome, who his name has been flown around with us, so that'll be, for another video. But yeah, the expectations were incredibly high and they were not able to reach that next level. But I think that sometimes, a change for better would, it just sometimes works. And, I don't believe that the Cavs would probably ask for crazy amount too much. Now we might have to give up a first round pick, might have to give up one of the young guys off the bench like a Jordan Hawkins, like a Brandon Boston, what I'm saying. And y'all know me, I'm a Jordan Hawkins guy, so I'd be very sad about that. But realistically, I don't think the Cavs are going to be asking for too much with Jarrett Allen. Now, Darius Garland, on the other hand, because, yes, we are in the market for a point guard given, DeJounte being hurt, CJ, there's no question, he's likely going to come back playing at a high level, but we don't fully know, and he's older. And then, Alvarado is more of an off-the-bench guy, more of a spark plug versus like a starting point guard. Not to say he can't change into that, but, again, as I said very early on, he's like a souped-up J.J. Barea. So we are in the market for a point guard, but Darius Garland is a multi-all-star, can be a go-to scorer. So he's going to command a lot more of an asking price. So realistically, feasibly, I think if Jarrett Allen, is available and on the books, then we might as well. We finished 27th in defense. That's not going to cut it. That's not going to get you to the playoffs, and that's not going to get you to the NBA Finals. Cavs finished second. Now, granted, that didn't guarantee anything for them either. But perhaps you have a defensive lineup with Yves Missy and Jarrett Allen. That's going to be a little hard as far as the rotations, but. Maybe that allows Yves Missy to come off the bench, develop, get a little bit more refinement in his game. But you got a guy like Herb Jones, you got a guy like Trey Murphy, very stout defenders. Obviously, Herb, as I've talked about the last 3 consecutive videos, he is that guy. Modern Tayshaun Prince. And then when DeJounte comes back, so there's a variety of defensive lineups that we can run here, and I think that would help with. Again, establishing a different culture, knowing Joe Dumars, and he's looking at that 04 team. I'm sure he probably still watches footage of that 04 team. The way in which they dominated opponents, the way in which they dominated the Lakers. Now, granted, yes, the Lakers had a lot of dysfunction in that locker room that particular year. There was a lot going on situationally, but still, they were not expected to win that. The Pistons were not expected to win that finals. All the talking heads. A lot of the media brass was saying Lakers, Lakers, Lakers. And why wouldn't they? The Lakers had won 3 NBA Finals from 2000 to 02. And they had the 2 premier players at their respective positions in Kobe and Shaq. So it made a lot of sense. But with Jarrett Allen, him coming over to, if he came over to the Pelicans, right? You know what I'm saying? Perhaps he could have an impact like a Ben Wallace. You know, obviously he's not the same caliber of a defender, but as just a physical paint presence, you know, I think it's a willing trade to look into. You know, as long as we don't have to give up the farm. I've always liked Jarrett Allen as a player. He's a good guy as well, good locker room guy, family oriented type of player. You know what I'm saying? So it's good to have those type of guys as well when building a new culture. You want to have guys who, you know, their mindset is basketball and taking care of themselves and their family. And not saying that these guys aren't thinking that, but with our boy Zion, we know sometimes his head is a little outside the game. He needs to be focused on this game, not the other game, if you know what I mean. You know, but it never hurts to have a guy that just physically, right? You think twice about coming into the paint, right? Because he's immovable and he's gonna be tough in the paint. He's gonna block shots. And also what people do underrate is that with Jarrett Allen's wingspan, he's very athletic. He can go out and guard on the perimeter. So that creates more interesting defensive lineups. That creates more interesting defensive lineups. That creates more interesting defensive rotations and more creativity in what we can do. So I'm all for that. You know, the more versatility that we have in our defensive lineups, the better. Again, 27th is not going to cut it. We have a lot of talent on paper, but championships are not won by paper. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, perhaps, again, Dumars is looking at that 04 team and seeing what Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace and maybe, you know, obviously neither Eve, Missy, or Jarrett Allen is like a floor spacer like Rasheed, but just being a physical big body, being a defensive presence as a big, who knows? Who knows? So, you know, food for thought, something to consider. Y'all let me know what y'all think. But I would not be opposed to that trade idea. I like that trade idea. I don't think that the Cavs are going to be asking for a crazy asking price. You know, I don't want to move our 7th pick, though. Let me just say that. I don't want to move our 7th pick, but if we have to give up CJ and a first round pick in another draft, then I'm not opposed to it. Love CJ, but, you know, does he fit our timeline? That's going to be the question that gets asked. But another guy who I also like as far as a potential trade piece, but I felt, you know, he's also been listed as someone we might be on the lookout for. But Mr. Cam Johnson. Now, Cam Johnson, I got the notes. I got the notes. Cam Johnson, 6'8", small forward, 29 years old, so he's older. You know, he played his ball first at Pittsburgh and then transferred over to UNC, really built up his stock. 11th pick in the 2019 draft, so he was in the same draft class as Zion and as Darius Garland, who I mentioned. This past year, had his best year, averaged nearly 19 a game, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and just incredibly efficient numbers across the board. Shot nearly, 47.5% from the field, 39% from 3, and 85% from the free throw line. For his career, he's averaged 13 a game, 4 boards, 2 assists, 45% from the field, 39% from the three-point line, and 85% for his career. And the Nets are a very interesting team. You know what I'm saying? This year, you know, they were ranked only one. They were actually ranked lower than us in three-point percentage. So we were 24th and they were 25th. But Cam Johnson, you know, is one of the best three-point shooters in the league. He's been one of the best three-point shooters since he was drafted. He played a very integral role as an off-the-bench player for that Suns team that went to the finals versus the Bucks and lost in 6 games. You know, he averaged 8, 3, and a steal, but he shot incredible efficiency from the field in that playoff run. He shot 50% from the field, 45% from 3, and nearly 91% from the free throw line, or no, basically 91%, yeah. And you know, this past year, you know, he really took another step. You know, I got to watch some more Nets games this year, and I was very impressed just as a veteran and just him looking for a shot more. And you know, I've talked about him as a comparison for a guy like Con Canopal. You know what I'm saying? A lights-out shooter, very efficient player, picks his spots well. And it's a lot more underrated in terms of his ability to be able to put the ball on the floor and create and get a bucket. And, he also, like Jarrett Allen, he started his career elsewhere. So, when he, in 4 years with the Suns, he averaged, about 11 a game, almost four boards, an assist, 44% from the field, 40% from the three, and 84% from the free throw line. But, with the increased opportunity in that Kevin Durant trade, he was able to, up his numbers to, 16, 4, and 3 assists in 3 years with the Nets, 46% from the field, 38.7 from three, so 39%, and about 86% from the free throw line, and finished third in Sixth Man of the Year 2022. And the Nets this year, they're in an interesting position because they have 4 first-round picks. They're loaded. They're over here. They're feeling like the Thunder. You know what I'm saying? They got all these first-round picks. What are they going to do with it? They literally pick right after us. So it's interesting. We pick at 7. They pick at 8. They got the 8th pick, the 19th pick, the 26th, and 27th pick. Now, given that they're trying to figure out what they do with their future, you know what I'm saying? They got a guy like Cam Thomas, but they don't know with the rest of the roster, like who is going to be a franchise piece and who's potential trade bait. It's possible that they end up using all 4 of their picks. You know what I'm saying? But if we could make a trade for Cam, I'm not opposed as well. You have a guy who has championship experience, you know what I'm saying, has been to the playoffs with both teams, so he's been a positive contributor. Just like Jarrett Allen, he's been a positive contributor in both spots. The last time the Nets made the playoffs, a season ago, you know what I'm saying? Surprisingly, no one expected it, but he averaged nearly 19 a game, 6 boards, 3 assists, 51% from the field, 43% from 3, and 86% from the free throw line. So he's a guy who big time players make big time plays, as they say, but he just shows up in big moments, right? He's not a star, he's not a number one guy, but you could do a lot worse than having a Cam Johnson on your team, whether you have him as your starter or you have him coming off the bench. Now, obviously, at this stage of his career, he's a player that has shown and proved he can be a starter, so it wouldn't make sense. Now, obviously, we have a lot. We're pretty, we've got a little bit of a logjam at the wings, but it doesn't hurt to add more shooters, right? It doesn't hurt to add guys who have playoff pedigree and even making it to the finals pedigree. It takes a lot to get there. And that Suns team, for all intents and purposes, they played very well as a unit. They really grinded and balled out hard. You know what I'm saying? You look at what a guy like Mikal Bridges is doing for the Knicks right now as they're trying to make a finals run, right? He was on that team. He was a supporting piece. So, and he was also included in that trade to go into Brooklyn. So, looking at things realistically, and he also is set to make around 20 mil, it would not be the worst idea. Again, another guy who had to work hard and he's a very consummate professional. Does not hurt to have a veteran like that on your team. Does not hurt to have a guy who is experienced and a guy who addresses an immediate need of three-point shooting, right? Because I mentioned that defense is very important. Defense wins championships. But in this day and age, and I'm not saying we got to turn into the Warriors or the Celtics of the previous couple years, but we need more floor spacing. We need more shooting. You know what I'm saying? Especially given that our franchise guy, Zion, who you'll notice he's not in this video, but he's obviously going to be brought up. He's going to be brought up, you know what I'm saying? But all roads today do not lead to Zion. This is an episode that is not talking about Mr. Zion Lateef Williamson. But for another, potential. No, I'm playing. It ain't potential. It's going to happen. But, it doesn't hurt to have more shooters. If we go through with the plan of having Zion play point, right? Imagine he's able to kick it out to Cam or Trey Murphy. Both of those guys are big enough that they can either play at the 4 or the 3. They can handle the ball well enough. They're not going to make dumb passes. So if they can't even get a 3 off, you pass it to them on the wing, they're going to be able to create an opportunity for themselves. And if they get fouled, they're both great. They're both really talented free throw shooters. So there's a lot of possibilities. And I feel like President Dumars has to take into account that in the modern NBA, because I know, to go back to the point about Jarrett Allen, right? He tried to do the big man thing with with Drummond and Greg Monroe, and it didn't necessarily work. But the reason why it didn't work was because they didn't have any shooters outside of KCP, who was a very streaky shooter, and Brandon Jennings before he had that Achilles injury that practically ended his career when he was having an All-Star level year. And I remember I was a huge Brandon Jennings fan coming up. You know what I'm saying? Fresh, especially when he was at Oak Hill. I thought the dude was going to be running the league. Hindsight 2020. But that team just did not have floor spacing. That team actually could have maybe been a bit more solid and a bit better, but they just did not have floor spacing. They did not have guys that can hit threes. I mean, I love Josh Smith. He was one of the most exciting dunkers in the 2000s, and if he had never gotten super, into falling in love with his three, I think his career would have lasted a lot longer. But he can't be. He wasn't a floor spacer. It was low-key like watching Zion try to be a three-point shooting guy. And it's like, that's not your game. Now, if that becomes Zion's game, then okay, hey, I eat my words. I'm willing. I'm man enough to acknowledge and take accountability if I'm wrong. But you got to play to your strengths. So a guy like Cam Johnson is a consummate player of playing to his strength. He knows his role. He knows what he has to do. And I say the same thing for Jarrett Allen. So if we do make any type of trades for any type of veterans, I'm not opposed with either guy. I don't want us to give up the farm. I don't want us to have to lose a lot of assets. But either guy wouldn't be too bad. And then let's say with the Nets, right? Let's say we get a Cam Johnson, but we also take one of their picks at 26, 27. You know what I'm saying? And I talked about a couple episodes ago about with the 28th pick, right? If we make a trade there. But the 26th pick, there's been guys like Kevin Martin, Peyton Pritchard, and Gerald Wallace who were picked at pick 26. If we come out the draft with a player like a Kevin Martin, who was a 20-plus scorer with the Kings and had some good years with the Timberwolves and the Rockets and the Thunder, right? Very, a player who today would probably eat even more, just given the three-point spacing and the defensive rules. You can't complain about that. Peyton Pritchard just had an amazing year, sixth man of the year. You know what I'm saying? Very talented scorer from all three levels despite his size, able to get a shot off anywhere. Gerald Wallace was a very underrated player. You know what I'm saying? Very athletic, highlight reel, cool guy as well. Met him as well back in like 2010. And he was an all-star with the Bobcats. He was able to get them to the playoffs. And he had a underrated mid-range game, but he was an incredible athlete, incredible defender. You know what I'm saying? You get a player like that at 26, you're not complaining. If they want to give us a 27th pick, right? 27, you got guys like Dennis Rodman, who's in the Hall of Fame, one of the greatest rebounders and defenders that we will ever see, and also one of the most enigmatic personalities that the sports world will ever see. You know what I'm saying? Like we just we will never see another Dennis Rodman. Jeremy Sohan, I know you're trying, but you just ain't there, my brother. You just ain't there. You got some ways to go. No diss to him, but just and that's not me throwing salt at a division rival, but just a little bit. But Dennis Rodman, a guy like Rudy Gobert, who Rudy might go to the finals. Rudy, multi-defensive player of the year, all-star, not an elite center, but able to provide value for those Timberwolves as their anchor back to basket guy. And then another guy who really, criminally underrated, and he is having an amazing playoffs. And if the Pacers go all the way, he is a big reason why. But Pascal Siakam, out of that 2016 draft class. And I forgot to mention, Gobert came out 2013, Rodman came out 86, Gerald Wallace came out 2001, and Pritchard came out 2020. But for Pascal, right, Pascal was not. No one expected Pascal to become what he did, but he developed his game, became incredibly versatile, came kind of like a Swiss Army knife at first, and then became somewhat of a go-to offensive guy. And now, granted, he wasn't able to reach that same level that he did in 2019, going into 2020 after Kawhi left for the Clippers. But that 2019 Raptors team, they don't win that finals if Pascal isn't there, right? Pascal was cooking Draymond Green. And Draymond Green is one of the best, defensive players as a as a Swiss Army knife type of player himself as well, as a big point, as an oversized point forward, undersized 4, undersized 5. And yeah, he was cooking Draymond. He was taking his lunch left and right. So, there's going to be those hidden gem type of players is what I'm saying. So if we're able to, get Cam in a late first rounder, the reason why I feel like this, because this draft is full of a lot of depth. There's a lot of guys who, are better than what they're projected at. Who knows, right? We could walk out with insane value. You know what I'm saying? Get a player for now and get a player for future. And in either situation, and getting Jarrett Allen or Cam Johnson, I think that's a win. As long as you don't give up too much, as long as you don't, we don't lose anyone that is a potential core piece, guys like Zion or Trey or Herb. I think them three need to be untouchable. And I put Yves Missy up there as well because he's only in year 1. But everyone else, and I don't want to put him up there because I feel like he hasn't gotten a chance to prove, but even DeJounte is not as untouchable as we would like to think. But, his contract, not every team is going to want to take that on. So, yeah, just potential. Food for thought, but I'm not opposed. Again, we did not shoot the 3 ball well last year, and that will make a big difference. We shot the 3 ball a lot better in 2024. 23-24 when we had BI and we had a healthy CJ. You know what I'm saying? So, and Herb was shooting like 40-something% from the 3 that year. So he was lights out. So it makes a big difference in today's league to have 3-point shooters, as we know. So to stay on that topic of 3-point shooting, now a player who I did a little bit of scouting today, but I also, know of a bit more because of some personal connection to a degree, 6 degrees of separation, let's put it like that. But Jase Richardson. So, I've talked about a variety of players, and a lot of the guys who I've talked about are kind of seen as like a lock-in as who we're likely going to get. If we stay at 7, we don't make any trades. But Jase Richardson was a player who impressed me a lot this year. 6'3", they say that's in shoes, and he's more like 6'1", pushing 6'2", but point 2 guard out of Michigan State. Michigan State was not at all projected to be a top team, but they made it all the way to the Elite 8. And they were, and make no mistake, Jase Richardson was a big reason why. You could argue, that he was their best player. 3rd team All Big Ten, Big Ten All Freshman, average 12 a game, 3 boards, 2 assists, and the efficiency that he had. As a young guy and as a young guard and as an undersized guard, this is kind of crazy, but he shot 49% from the field, 41% from the 3, and 84% from the free throw line. He had 6 20-point games. He had a really big game against number 23 ranked Oregon. He had 29, 5 boards and a steal, and they won that game 86-74. Shot 9 of 13 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3, 8 of 9 from the free throw line. Had another big game versus number 12 ranked Michigan, in-state rival, Michigan State, Michigan games. Those are, that's big time beef right there. That's big time beef. As big as beef as Ohio State and Michigan is, Michigan and Michigan State is, if anybody, has any connection to Michigan. Y'all know. Y'all can speak, y'all can attest and speak to it. And he put up 21, 6 boards, 3 steals, and they won that game, 75-62. He had shot 7 for 12 from the field, 2 for 4 from 3, and 5-6 from the free throw line. Now, also to be mentioned, son of Jase Richardson, who was one of the most explosive, coldest, most exciting dunkers of the 2000s, bar none. I'd argue it's like him and Vince as far as who was the best dunker of that time. And Jase Richardson was a guy that always was like on the verge of potentially being an all-star. When he was in Golden State, when he was in Charlotte. And then he had some good years with Phoenix. They went all the way to the Western Conference Finals in 2010. And he had some good years with the Magic. You know what I'm saying? So hats off to Jase Richardson. One of my favorite, like, non-all-star, but to me, like an all-star caliber player. And Jase is a very different player. Now, he's got a brother, Jackson, who's a lot more like Jason. But Jase is a lot more, very fundamentally sound player, has a very complete offensive game. He's not the explosive athlete like his pops, but he can get up there. He can bang out, but he's not like a super, like, jump out the gym type of athlete. but he plays at his own pace. And as a player of his age, right, he was a freshman, right, 18, 19. His composure, his level-headedness, you can see that influence of being a player's son. And that plays a big part. I think people, when you look at different guys throughout history who were sons of NBA players, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that Jase is these players or whatever, but I'm just to give as an example, right? Kobe, Steph Curry, Kevin Love, right? They all were sons of NBA players, and you know what I'm saying? That gives you a different type of mental intuneness and awareness because you're directly learning from you have the man who is teaching you everything in order to be a man, right? Directly been in your shoes of being a pro, and he knows what it takes, and he knows how to stay around for the long haul. And I feel like as a player, I feel like, with respect to Coach Tom Izzo, one of the greatest college coaches of all time. One of the greatest coaches just ever. You know what I'm saying? Elite basketball mind. But I don't feel like Jase, I don't feel like the quality and caliber of player that Jase is and was. And I 6 degrees of separation with him. But he's a killer. He can really hoop. He can really ball. He's really nice. Just fundamentally sound, beautiful jump shot, great, underrated passer, hustles hard on defense. Is not afraid of the moment. You know what I'm saying? Even when he didn't shoot so well, he had a couple of games in the tournament where he didn't shoot as well, but he was still out there diving for loose balls. That's the kind of guy that plays a big role on a team. Now, he would be a bit of a reach at pick 7. I'm not going to sit and lie. In comparison to some of the other guys that I've named, like Jeremiah Fears, Trey Johnson, Kon Kanopel, Kaman Malak, he's a bit of a reach at pick 7, yes. But I do think he has a high ceiling because he wasn't able to be fully unleashed in the Michigan State offense. If he had went to another school and they was like, yo, bro, go out there and cook, I think his numbers would be a lot better and people wouldn't be like, this is a crazy projection. But he's a first-round guy, make no mistake. Definitely a first-round guy, fundamentally sound. And some of the players that he was compared to as well. I really like the group of players that he was compared to. He was compared to Monte Ellis, who, you want to talk about players who should have been all-star, but didn't, weren't. Monte Ellis was a dog for for multiple teams, for the Warriors, for the Bucks, for the Pacers, and even for the Mavs. Incredibly fun scorer to watch, you know what I'm saying, just pure bucket getter. Derek White, who is, another guy who could be an all-star. If he was on another team, if he was on any other team but the Celtics, could be an all-star. He was a big reason for why the Celtics won last year and, is one of the best 6-man / non-all-star starters in this game today. A guy like Dante DiVincenzo. Now, he's not on the same level of Monte or Derek White, but he's, been a valuable piece. He was a big reason for the Knicks resurgence last year, and he's been a big reason for the Timberwolves, playing at the level that they did, and that was a lot of Knicks fans were sad to lose DiVincenzo because he brought a different type of grit, Big Red over there. And he was a winner in college at Villanova, He played next to Brunson and Bridges, So he has a pedigree that precedes him of being around and making big plays. And then some of the other comparisons. Now, the comparison that I love the most for Jase Richardson and watching his game, he reminds me a lot of Eric Gordon. Now, Eric Gordon was, when he was in high school, I remember when he busted both of Jordan's sons. Like, he put up like 40 or 50, and Jordan's sons combined for like 10. Like, and it was rough. And Jordan was in the stands looking like, y'all ain't my sons. Like he wanted to snatch the Jordan last name like T.I. and ATL when he snatched when Rashad, I'll be calling the actors versus the name, but when Rashad took Nunu's chain, like, get out of here, you know what I'm saying? But I like the Eric Gordon comparison a lot. Eric Gordon, similar player, right? Undersized 2 that could, play the 1, but more of a 2. I think Jase Richardson actually has a lot more point guard instincts than people realize, just because, like, he can be a floor general out there. A lot more than people think, but it's just the way the offense that Michigan State ran one guy is not going to have the ball and ball dominate. It's just not, right? Like it's different versus when they had guys like Draymond Green, who I mentioned, or like Cassius Winston, who I mentioned last episode, or like going a little bit more back, Kalen Lucas, super fun player to watch, or way back to when his pops was there, Jase Richardson, when a guy like Mateen Cleaves, right? Mateen Cleaves was the ultimate floor general type of point guard. But I feel like Eric Gordon's a good comparison because, he was a very smooth player, great shooter, and was able to pick his spots well. And he had some good years with us. I'm saying in 4 years with us, averaged 15 a game, 3 assists, 2 boards, shot 42% from the field, but shot 39% from 3 and 82% from the free throw line. Now, I'm not going to lie, that video with KG, if you know, that video is forever embedded in my memory when thinking about Eric Gordon for sorry, y'all. That's actually one of the funniest videos in history of the NBA. But that video is forever embedded in my memory about Eric Gordon. But aside from that, Eric Gordon, played some big minutes for us when we went to the playoffs in 2015. Granted, we didn't have a shot in hell against those, Golden State Warriors, and that was the start of their dynasty. But him and Drew Holiday were they played a valuable role. They were valuable, floor spacers and on-ball scorers next to Anthony Davis. And, I don't think that's a bad comparison. Eric Gordon, when he first got traded in, he was lights out. He was playing like an all-star caliber player, right? And then he, had injuries, and then, the team just transitioned more and more to, Anthony Davis being the guy. So, because he came over in the Chris Paul trade. But, overall, I don't think that's a bad comparison. If you get an Eric Gordon type of player at pick 7, who, ironically, he was pick 7 back in the day by the Clippers in 08, you could do a whole lot worse, okay? And a Jase Richardson could step in, learn a lot from a guy like CJ, who, again, similar type of player, picks his spots well, efficient shooter from all 3 levels, and can play point if need be, but also is going to look for a shot as a 2. That wasn't a bad comparison. Some other comparisons, Rip Hamilton, that one. I'm like, maybe they're going off of the Michigan connection or something like that, or like Detroit, Michigan State. But as far as like the shooting ability, I can see. And then another comparison, a guy who I just mentioned in terms of Jarrett Allen in the 2019 draft class, but Darius Garland. And Darius Garland is much more of a floor distributor, floor general, but he can definitely get his shot when need be. Very smooth player, plays with his own pace, just very level-headed, poised type of player. He was that type of player in college he was that type of player in college. And you get a player like Jase who has the pro pedigree from his pops, and then just playing under a legendary coach like Tom Izzo, having a good tournament, not a great, but a good tournament, and being a leader for a team that people did not anticipate and expect to go far. Like that, those are all ingredients of a player who is ready to step in and contribute day one. Now, President Dumars has a lot to figure out. Drafting, as we all know, is not the strongest suit of his, not the strongest. But maybe Jase comes over and he's like a lefty Chauncey Billups. Who knows? But again, the realm of possibility is there. Now, again, I mentioned that those other guys are more likely going to be picked at pick 7, but who knows? Who knows what ends up happening on draft night? There's much to look forward to, much that's going to go down. But as I mentioned with Joe Dumars, hey, he said, well, let's keep it going with Detroit. Let's keep that Detroit Motown mojo, because we just hired Troy Weaver today. So there was a lot of interesting moves going on today. We first signed Jason Hervey as our new director of player personnel. And we also signed David Smith as our team basketball operations manager. And I wish the best of luck to them brothers, and I hope that they contribute well. Now, Troy Weaver, we hired as our senior VP. Now, I was perusing through the Pelicans Reddit, and it was a interesting amount of different feedback. Now, Troy Weaver, has been around the game for a long time. He first got he first made a name for himself working on Jim Boeheim. Shout out to Jim Boeheim, one of the best college coaches as well. His staff at Syracuse, and he scouted and recruited Carmelo Anthony. And for those who remember, Carmelo took Syracuse all the way to an NCAA title, against a very talented Kansas team as a freshman. And parlayed that into being picked number 3 in the draft. Now, granted, Joe Dumars did miss out on picking Melo, and the Pistons scouted and brought in Melo, but I'm not putting that on Troy Weaver. That's on Dumars. That's on President Dumars. Unfortunately, you know what I'm saying. Oh, okay. Let me keep going. Then he made a name for himself with the Jazz. He was the head scout for them from 04 through 07. They drafted Darren Williams in that time frame, 2005. They also, got guys like Paul Millsap and C.J. Miles, who were valuable role players before they went on elsewhere. And he was the player personnel director for the Jazz in the 07-08 year, where things really just clicked on another level. They went 54-28, fourth in the West. Nearly, anybody who remembers watching that time, they weren't going to win, but they played competitive against the Lakers, against the Lakers team that, that was Kobe on a mission, winning his first MVP. I could talk about Kobe for hours. I'm not going to lie to y'all, but this is not about Kobe. This is not about Kobe. It's about the Pelicans, and it's about the Jazz and what Mr. Troy Weaver was doing over there. But, the personnel-wise, he built a very good team at the Jazz. I talked about Mehmet Okur, who was a Joe Dumars draft pick. He was their center there. I talked about Andre Kirilenko briefly when talking about Cooper Flagg, as far as like him being like a souped-up version of him, which is a very scary player. I think people are underrating the type of player that Kirilenko would be in today's NBA. You know what I'm saying? But he also, they got Carlos Boozer, who was one of the best pick-and-pop big men, all-star, multiple years. And, I'm excited to see, as a Duke fan, I'm very excited to see what his sons do with us, especially Cameron Boozer. I think Cameron Boozer is going to be a top 3, top 5 pick this year. Y'all gonna see. Y'all gonna see for yourself. God forbid we do bad. Hey, we get a Cam Boozer. We're doing all right. We're doing all right. You know what I'm saying? And then he was able to get a job with the he parlayed his success, went on to OKC in 2008. And was their assistant GM, and he scouted and drafted Russell Westbrook. I talked about with VJ Edgecombe about like him very much looking like the next type of Russell Westbrook as his ultimate ceiling, right? And he was drafted, part of the regime that drafted James Harden in 2009. Serge Ibaka was, I believe Serge Ibaka was a draft day trade. You know what I'm saying? But that Thunder team, obviously that, KD was an 07 draft pick. That Thunder team, salute to the Thunder right now. They're killing it. Sam Presti has done a wonderful, amazing job. Arguably the best GM in the league. But that Thunder team became one of the most dominant teams in the 2010s and looked like they were going to be a title contender for years to come after they made the finals in 2012. And we're going to see if the Thunder can do it again, if they can make the finals. We're going to see. We got this, maybe the Timberwolves pull a 2016 Warriors and come back 3-1, or who knows. But, and he was the VP assistant GM up until the 2019-2020 season. So he was able to see a lot of different years, and he was able to be a part of the initial foundation to where they're at now. And then he was the senior advisor for the Wizards. They had their struggles, they had their... okay, hold on, sorry. I glossed over, though. But he ended up... I messed up. My bad, y'all. Again, I'm man enough to admit my mistakes. He was able to... He came over after 20... Sorry, yeah, let's skip the Wizards. But he came over to the Pistons in 2020. And now... This is where a lot of the fans in the Pelicans Reddit were just going off about anything but him, you know what I'm saying, and saying, oh, Dumars is trying to bring Detroit to New Orleans. But I will say, right, in talking about President Dumars, right, and I said that drafting is not a strong suit, but because the Pistons went 74 and 244, and then last year, only winning 14 games. That was rough. And we won 21 games this year, so we're not trying to be on that type of timing. But under his regime, he drafted Cade Cunningham, who I talked about a couple of episodes ago, one of the best young players in the league, just got All-NBA second-team honors, was a first-time All-Star, very versatile player, 25, 6-5 guy on very efficient shooting. He's very promising young star in the game today. A guy like Jaden Ivey, who when healthy was playing really well as the real second option in Detroit, and I think obviously he had a very very debilitating injury that came about this year, and I'm hoping he comes back healthy because I really like Jaden Ivey, who was a great player at Purdue. Drafted Asar Thompson, I'm very high on both him and his brother Amen. Asar is a lot more of a defensive lockdown type of guy than Amen, but I think Asar Thompson has a very promising future. He showed a lot of promise this past playoffs, and also drafted Jalen Durham, one of my favorite young big men in the league. A very traditional back-to-the-basket type of big, but very athletic, very active on both ends. And Ron Holland, this past 2024 draft, who, was projected to be a number one pick at one point of the draft process, but he slipped to pick 5, I believe like pick 5 or something like that. But, in his rookie year, showed promise coming off the bench and looks like he has a bright future. So looking at Detroit, right now with them, they've built a nice young team. We have everything possible to build a nice young team. Our young guys are a little bit older, a little bit more seasoned. It's just all about getting back to that level we were at in 2024 when we won 49 games. Now, I talked about President Dumars. I believe President Dumars is good at instilling culture, building different, building from the ground up. But Troy Weaver has a pretty good draft history. I named the different guys. He's got a pretty good ear and eye for the game as far as a scout. So it does not hurt to have a guy like him in the fold, right? President Dumars is going to do his thing, but I know he probably has a deep respect for Troy Weaver, them both coming up out of the Pistons. He's likely going to, seek his counsel, seek his perspective and advice. So, hey, not the glass is the glass half empty, half full. Let's not all rush to down the move. Let's give it a go. I mentioned, right, he scouted Melo back in the day, right, and he scouted Russell Westbrook before people really knew about Russ. So I trust that in the right environment, and we have the makings of a very talented team. We already got building blocks. We already got guys who have shown and proven already. Allow Troy Weaver to do his magic. Allow him to step in and come in and make an impact as a guy who drafts well, as a guy who has a good eye for player talent. A guy who's been on coaching staffs. Because when you've been on a coaching staff, it's very different than being in a front office. Coaching staff, you're literally out there on the court. You're watching these guys day in and day out. You're utilizing your own basketball IQ and your knowledge, and you're giving the insight to players who are younger, trying to learn the game from a more finite perspective. So Troy Weaver has been around the game for a long time. So I believe that we should see this through, see the vision through. Maybe we'll see what type of impact that Jason Hervey has and David Smith. And David Smith, gotta mention, as I mentioned with Jase Richardson, that's Steve Smith's son. Another Michigan State legend. Steve Smith had some great years with the Hawks, with the Spurs, and the Miami Heat. Great shooter, all-star in his day as well. So perhaps he's got some perspective as being a son of an NBA player. So overall, I think hope is up. Optimism is up. All this doom and gloom is not going to get us anywhere. It's not going to do any good, right? A focused mind creates a focused drive. And I really believe that, if we go into this draft, we do our homework, we do our scouting, we make sure that we make as educated and informed of a position as possible when it comes to who we select, if we stay at 7. Whether we, now granted, things can change and happen. We could make a blockbuster trade and move up, Or we could just, move down a little bit, but add more picks, stockpile, get more depth. There's a lot of range of possibility. You know what I'm saying? I know a lot of people were feeling like hope was lost when we got the 7th pick, but this is a very talented draft. These next 2 drafts are incredibly talented and full of a lot of depth, full of a lot of young guys with a lot of promise. So let Mr. Weaver do his magic. Let President Dumars do his magic. And let's see where things can go. So, again, I'm trying to stay positive. I saw a comment under the last video. I'll bring up his name, and I'm gonna give him a shout out because I like this comment a lot. Now, I love all y'all comments, truly. So it's some guys who I particularly look forward to reading and seeing okay, what's he gonna say about this video now? But a comment that I really liked. It was in the video. It was in the video before, 2 videos before. I'm gonna bring this up very, very briefly, but I just want to give him a shout out because he's probably watching. But it was a comment from. Where is he at? Oh my gosh, I'm mad that I cannot find it. Was it on the net? You know what? That's where it was on. Okay. No, jeez. Oh my gosh. Why can I not find this comment? I'm so sorry, y'all, because I'm trying to wrap up this video. But this is a really good comment. This is a really good comment. I swear, I hope he didn't delete it. I think it was right. Let's see, y'all. Let's see. Oh my gosh. I need to write y'all names down when y'all drop a comment that I like. That way I can reference it a little easier. Okay, here it is. Yeah. So he was talking about with Herb. He was like, no, we shouldn't. I'm gonna read it out verbatim but shout out to Red Christmas. If you're watching this, Red Christmas, shout out to you, my man. He said, no, we should not shop Herb, and I wish you weren't doing multiple parts of the topic and giving that BS more life. I agree. I don't want to give it more life. I want us to keep Herb for the long haul. I want Herb to retire as a Pelican. But he said, I'll still give your content a good try. So I appreciate that. Thank you. It's all about taking a chance, taking a shot with me. You roll with me, we can go far. He said, I feel like I'm a diehard fan who is not with what I call the region hating and New Orleans sports hating stuff from the big networks or the bucket, crap, self-hating stuff that come by into it, in my opinion, either. And he's saying, not saying that's you. So if you give me an alternative and some relief from the big sports networks, then I'm all in first. No Diddy. I love that comment. Yo, I love that comment 1,000%. Red Christmas. Shout out to you if you're watching this video. Shout out to all y'all. Truly, I love all y'all for real. Y'all have really been showing me a lot of love and support, and it's genuine. But yeah, I love that comment because, again, when I'm reading this the Reddit forums, I'm reading the different comment sections on some of the Instagram, I'm reading some of the different threads on Threads or on X. It's a lot of negativity. A lot. I promise y'all, negativity does not increase and create positivity. It just does not. You cannot go into things, lambasting and slamming everything. There's not to say that there's not things to be upset about, right? We have been through a lot, especially in 7 years after drafting Zion, in the aftermath of drafting AD, and even going all the way back to CP3, right? We've been through a lot as a franchise. We have, and we have grievances that deserve to be heard and addressed. But I think a culture shift is happening. I believe that there is a serious concerted effort to try to build a strong winning culture, build one that's hard-nosed, build one that utilizes the versatility of our various players and makes the most of the talent that we've got, and also bringing in young talent to continue the progression, keep taking the baton and taking it further. So again, I got faith. I know, again, his record in Detroit, I know that there's some problems with that, but where his strength of being a player evaluator and scouter, I think that's the perfect marriage next to, to President Dumars as an overall team builder. So keep the faith. That's my message, y'all. Keep the faith in life in general, but keep the faith with the Pelicans. I think a new dawn is upon us. I think a new age is upon us. And I think a new culture is going to be instilled and built. I'm very excited for this 2025-2026 season. Very excited for the rest of the playoffs. It's been awesome, exciting. And that, again, that's going to, who ends up winning the finals. That has an impact on what teams are doing in the offseason, what teams are doing in the draft. So, stay tuned for more. I can't wait to deliver and give y'all more content. Y'all have been, again, showing me so much love in a short span of time. So hats off to y'all. Nothing but the flowers. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, follow, fan arts on all social media. They're doing so many amazing, awesome things. But make sure to keep staying tapped in and tuning in with Pelicans Daily. I'm your host, Dylan Bruton. Appreciate y'all. Signing out. Ciao.